Well, howdy, y'alls. It's me again, Dr. E, back to help you out with our Module 4 materials. And, well, we got a lot of meaty stuff this week. Oof. Chapter 10. Ooh, dense. I mean, good, but dense. Chapter 10, let me back up. Let me give you a quick little idea of what I got planned for this little video. I'm going to go over some some key things. All right. I'm going to leave it up to you though to kind of do a finer read. Okay, you want to make sure that you're getting the details. But I simply don't have enough time to go over all the different forms of classification and taxonomy and all that good stuff, typology. But I'm going to try to give you some insights on it. What I want to do, here's the teaser. Let me get my stuff out. Oh, making all sorts of noise. So, I want to spend some time talking about rocks when we finally get to materials and what we actually look at, chunk of obsidian, and talk about the tools that we use to work such things. Old school and new school. But I don't want to jump ahead yet. I'll set that aside. There we go. That's a good spot for it. So, let's go to Chapter 10. Classifying artifacts. So, you got a great example about the Lady of Cowl in Peru. Really cool mummy. Amazing preservation. And tells us stuff that we haven't known. Just opens an entire book up on learning more about Moche civilization. It's really incredible. This whole chapter is really all about how we classify things, which is all about how we try to put them in some sense of order, some logical organization. Right? That's what the classification is all about. And you can also think of it as a way that we order data, right? Because, all these artifacts and features and all that stuff that we gain through doing research, right? We got to do something with it. We use it in many different ways, but we gotta organize it so we can use it, right? And that's really where the systems of classification come in. We also, think of, you may be working on your one little thing, right? But there's a whole wide world of archaeologists out there, and probably a lot of others that have done work through history, right, in your neck of the woods. So you also want to think that we kind of got a data collective, right? All these reports written by previous archaeologists or folks that have done previous work in the area. So always think that you're contributing to that, and it helps everyone, right? It helps you and helps others. It's an important thing to keep in mind. So we got taxonomy, which is a system of classification. Think classic Linnaean biological classification of animalia, plants, yada yada, and you start having suborders, that sort of stuff. That's a taxonomic form of classification. We also have systematics. Now, that's all about creating units of classification, kind of like Linnaeus. He's a good example of it. We got to understand that that's fairly arbitrary in a lot of ways. It's all done through a projected perspective. We try to be objective, but it's still a human thought, this whole idea of classification, right? So there's a lot of variability within it. Probably most important is to keep in mind our objectives of classification, which are to organize data into meaningful units, to describe types, individual features, whatnot, to identify relationships between types. That kind of gets into hierarchies, right? We get this type, which is lesser than this type, or is similar to yada yada. And we want to study assemblage patterns, variability in the archaeological record, right? So we're always looking to see where our stuff fits into the greater scheme of things and what that reveals, right? The patterns and insights that that grants us. Um, yeah, perhaps one of the most common is that we use a system of typology to classify artifacts, and it's really kind of grouping things based on type, based on their form, their chronology, function, and style. All right. Again, it's pretty arbitrary, but really the important thing is that by comparing to others, we are actually able to achieve some objectivity. All right. Now, I'm not going to get into the finer arguments of the limits of objectivity, but it's important to realize when you compare one thing to another and then to a bunch of others, you can actually create an objective perspective, right? Even though it may be limited in some ways. Still better than nothing. So yeah, in terms of types, we often have descriptive forms of classification. You know, what's its physical properties? What's its form? What's its shape? What's its length? What's its width? What color is it? What sorts of features does it have on it? All that descriptive. We also have functional. And this is really kind of looking more at the cultural role of the artifact, its relationship with and to people. It's very interpretive, as you can imagine, because it's a bunch of modern day archaeologists looking at old stuff, right, and using their noodles to try to figure things out. But some sorts of things that, more of the functional, you got to think not just physical functionality, right? It's tool use, right? But also the role it played within society. For example, there are some groups that only certain types of individuals had certain items. There's a great example of, what is it? Steel axes for Stone Age Australians is a classic article. Although, what's really important for my example here is that only certain individuals within that particular group had access to stone axes. It was limited to only a select few, right, that met various criteria, had certain status. Status creates a hierarchy. That's looking more at the social function, the social role of the artifact within the society. So, got descriptive and functional. Two key things to keep in mind, and we like to put them together. It's a good thing. Stylistic is kind of a further extension of functional. It's really looking at social status in particular, identifying relationships between specific form and function and role in society. We got quantitative and qualitative methods of analysis. As you can imagine, qualitative is really descriptive, right? It's going to be trying to narrate the data versus quantitative, which is numbers driven. Okay, this is converting the information that we gain out of excavations and research into numerical data that we can then process through statistical means. And it gives us some crazy cool insights, puts the computers to use, is really where this came from. And there's all sorts. There's a good example in our text about the Anglo-Saxon burial at Cleetham, England. We got descriptive stats. You can look at the different kinds of artifacts, their size, their location from the site. All of that can be digitized, if you would, turned into numbers, right, and then crunched with various statistical programs. We do a lot of hypothesis testing with this form of quantitative analysis and methodology. Things that we call confirmation testing. So, it's the probability of the correct inference In other words, it's the probability of how right we might be in our interpretation of said thing. Uh, yeah. I gotta say, I can do some standard statistical manipulations, and it's an excellent skill to have for a modern day archaeologist. Okay, because we got to use our tools, right? And the computer is one of them. But there are folks that literally just specialize in the quantitative techniques, and they always have a job, right? Because there are folks like me that can't do it all, and then subcontract or hire, whatever, the specialist, dun dun dun, the math people, the math archaeologists, as I like to think of them. Yeah, anyway, we got attribute analysis. You can look at the size and shape and the color. You got formal and stylistic and technological as well, so check those out. Now, all of these forms of classification help us describe and outline various assemblages and patterns that we're able to glean from the data. Okay, and it's important to keep in mind that you may be working on your one little thing, your one little literally unit within a site, but you're not an island, right? And remember that collective, that data collective that I was talking about earlier. You're going to be using that, and it's going to inform your interpretation. It's going to influence it at the very least, right? Because that's the known information. That's the current knowledge that we have. Pretty common sorts of patterns that we look for are looking at the relationships between features, artifacts, and broader relationships like subsistence technology, right? Or the subsistence system. How are these people surviving? Okay, and it doesn't matter if you are a prehistoric Cro-Magnon or a modern American. We all use tools that sustain us in some fashion, right? Like we use industrialized agriculture and livestock production. Go watch Food Inc. if you haven't watched already. Outlines it very well. But subsistence strategies are directly tied to technology type because it's based on the environment. What resources do you have? And that has an influence on social organization, social practices, beliefs, all of it. It's all connected in a beautiful holistic knot. And that's the fun part, kind of teasing those relationships out. That's what I do with my faunal analysis. I look at how people use their available resources from their local environment and how that sustains them. That's kind of my bread and butter. Anyway, enough of that. Enough of Chapter 10. Let's get on to some more fun stuff. Going through my notes. Technologies of the Ancients. Pretty cheesy title, but really cool stuff. I'm probably going to spend the most talking about lithic technology, stone tools, but we'll touch on others as well. Make sure to read up on the ones that I don't focus on. Okay. Stone tools. Where to start? We call it lithics, and the study of it is lithic analysis. I do quite a bit of this, and we got to understand when we're talking about rocks, right? The thing that you make from it is done through a reductive process. You are removing bits in chunks. Okay, you're not adding things. You can't. All right, 5-minute epoxy didn't exist back then. So let's see if I can find something here in my grab bag. So here's a bit of a core remnant, and we have we have the principles of manufacture. Okay, so we might start with just, let me look in my other box. There we go. Here's a chunk of mahogany obsidian, right? Unprocessed. This is actually an artifact, a prehistoric one, but not significant in the least. There's a gazillion of these things, particularly here in Central Oregon. I'm not in Central Oregon, but I go to Central Oregon frequently to collect obsidian because I love practicing and working with the stuff. Anyway, this was driven off of a bigger chunk, and you can actually see the bulb of percussion, this thing that kind of sticks out here, and this was driven off a bigger chunk. Kind of like that. And reductive, it's removing, right? So you might, start with a nice fair-sized chunk, and you might turn it into a core. Now, the principles of manufacture suggest that we start with the simplest and move towards more complex. So the very first stone tools were really some ugly stuff. You would literally take a hard rock, a homogeneous rock, homogeneous meaning same. You don't want it with inclusions, bubbles, veins, stuff like that, because that's gonna mess up how the rock fractures. And good materials like obsidian, chert, flint, there are others, but those are the biggies, are very predictable, right? Through years, thousands of years of trial and error, people have figured out how to break these rocks, right, and create unique tools. Some of them just absolutely mind-blowing. There's even going beyond tools. There's examples of knapped jade and obsidian from Central and South America. These things called eccentricities or something like that. I can't remember the name. But there are these elaborate profiles of individuals that are literally knapped out of stone. They're highly detailed, too. Perhaps the apex of stone tool or stone working. Anyway, getting off on tangents. So, principles of manufacture, simple to complex. Earliest ones, you'd literally drive a blade, a flake off, and whoa, sharp edge, watch out. And you could use that to do all sorts of things. Imagination's the limit here. Everything from, cutting plants, processing plants, butchering out animals. Really cool is that there's a whole kind of arena within lithics that looks at the wear that we find on the artifacts, and you can tell what it's been used to work. Right? Has it been used to work wood? Has it been used to work bone? What sort of processes did the rock go through? What sort of use? Really cool stuff. So we go from simple, and let's see what I can find in here. This is kind of my grab bag. Let's see if I got any. Here's an example. All right, so this is actually in process, and this started as just a chunk of rock, a large flake that I knocked off another chunk, a core, and I'm going in and I'm retouching it. Right, I'm shaping it, and let's see if I can get the light on it just right, and you can see the scar pattern there on the side. All right, all those flake removal scars. And I could continue to work this. It's been worked on both sides, and turn it into a point or some tool. This was going to be a point, and I know why I gave up on it. I started getting some stepping. Let's see if I can show that. There you go. All right, these percussion, these cordial scar marks, they're getting stepped, not smooth percussions or scalloping, and so that wasn't good enough for me. So I threw it in my waste bin. Let's see here. Here's another piece of work. You can see the scarring, the flake removal scars. Really nice, sweet piece of obsidian too. Pretty translucent. Now, let me talk about cores a little bit. The core, here's a core remnant. It's kind of like your prehistoric Swiss Army knife. I even think our textbook says that, right? Because you carry around one of these, and I don't know, a small hammerstone, and you got everything you need to cut and to make specialized instruments. I can knock a blade flake off of this, retouch it, and I got an instant X-Acto knife, right? Like sharper than an X-Acto knife. So sharp they actually use them in open heart surgery today because when you heal, there's less scarring than using a stainless steel blade. Pretty crazy cool. So yeah, this is kind of like your prehistoric Swiss Army knife. You whack bits off, you retouch those for your specific things, and yeah. Like I don't go anywhere. I don't leave my house without my pocket knife in my bag or in my pocket, something like that. Like the blade is one of the most fundamental tools in existence in history. I mean, just look at it. We started with simple flakes, and now to katana swords. The blade, you still use them every day. Scissors, steak knives, you name it, right? Paring knives. Yeah, so can't underscore the importance in history of the technology of the blade. Now, in a previous video, I showed you some projectile points, and I pointed out kind of some differences of pretty chunky stuff, basic, really simple, to more refined and more complex things with serration. Yeah, so I'm going to stop going off on simple to complex. Read some of the examples in there. Acheulean hand axes. They talk about Clovis points, which are some of the most amazing projectile points in the world. But I wanted to show you some of my tools that I use to work stone. We got our old school stuff. This is a white-tailed deer antler. Hold on, there we go. And this would be a hammer. You can see the use. This is all worn away. That's the working end. This is the handle. And that fits in my hand just perfect. And I can tack, 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 tack. This is kind of my medium, if you would. Here's my big boy. This is a chunk of elk antler. And this is crazy cool. This puppy pops the most perfect primary flakes. It's magical. I can't seem to go wrong with it. But it's for large reduction, right? The primary flakes that get driven off. Then you got your secondary, tertiary, micro flaking, retouching flakes, things like that. And you use different tools for each. So this is my big guy, my medium guy. I held this up a minute ago. This is one of my little fingerling stones, and this you can see the pitting on the ends. I use this for really fine flake removal. You can see how it's kind of flat. awesome tool. Antler tines. Let's see if hold on. Here's my fave. Now this is actually from the same white-tailed deer antler. One of the tines that came off of it. I've cut this up. And this fits in my hand perfectly. You see how that? And this is a pressure flaker. I'd put this on the edge and drive down, and it'll remove a flake from the underside. You can do really incredible stuff with this. And periodically, I rework the tip. I grind it, usually against the concrete, and I'll point, make it more pointy, and over time it wears down. Then I regrind it. Here's another little tine. It's a little pointier. Not as comfortable in my hand though. There's a big tine. This is what I use when I do indirect flaking. I'll use an anvil. I'll have my piece set up on an anvil, and I'll use a different type of hammerstone and drive down on it, and it'll dry flakes off. Pretty awesome. Here's a really cool one. This is a retouching stone. This is also an artifact, but again, not significant. A gazillion of them. You see it from the side. You can see how this worn thing. You literally would take this along an edge. Let me find it. Yeah, and kind of just. It's also known as an abrader. You can set up platforms. You can also use it to lightly microflake. The other end is for slapping. Is kind of like a hammerstone. So this is 2-in-1. And yes, I still use it. It's good stuff. Here's a big old core. I've just prepared this one. I've cleaved it, so I got a nice platform. All right, and I will drive flakes off. Usually, kind of at these. Let's see if I can point one out right here. This is kind of a ridge, and if I were to whack it, let me see. Right about there, it would drive this flake off. Here's another kind of promontory point. You see that ridge? Same thing. Yeah. I've just prepared this one. I haven't actually got to working it, but beautiful material. This is black obsidian with some mahogany in it. Really fairly translucent as well. Here's my biggest hammerstone. My big boy. And you better watch out when you're using this, because if you miss, you're going to hit yourself, and it's going to hurt. Alright. Yeah. I could keep going on and on. I'll show you a modern tool. This is what we call a copper bopper, or just a bopper. And this is actually a piece of copper plumbing. It's an end cap that I rounded the top ever so slightly from banging it on the inside, hammering it on out so it had a nice curve. And I then got a piece of dowel and epoxied this bad boy on, right? And there's also, I have a little lead weight. I melted some lead and poured it onto the top to give it that nice front heavy. And you can see it is well used. This puppy's really great for large chunks. You want to go chunk in and break up large stuff. This is my boy. Yeah. Okay. I could keep going on, but I'm like almost at 30 minutes, so I'm going to have to cut this because it's not like anyone's going to watch past this anyway. Anyway, yeah, I hope that was oh, good info for y'all, and let me know if you have any questions. Post to the general questions forum, email me, call me, text me. I'm here to serve your needs. So that's where I'll leave this, and I'll see you all in the discussion forums. Take care.